Ladies, gentlemen, and druids of all ages, Season 5 starts in just a couple of days for Diablo 4, and with it comes a surprisingly large amount of changes just for the base classes themselves, and the items for them, too, especially for those who haven't been keeping up. And while Druid has always been a bit of a slow leveler, this should be the fastest season we've had yet, partially due to a big change to the way that Druid damage scales in general with our main stats, as it's now just way friendlier, and while that will of course give us a lot more damage in endgame when we are full of stats, I wouldn't underestimate how big of a shift that will be to earlier levels as well, as even from when we go from 1 to 100 willpower, in theory from this change alone at that point we'll be doing 25% more damage than we were before this change, as it just sort of applies underneath all other damage modifiers, making it an extremely potent change. All that said, whether you've already decided that you are set on playing Druid this season, or if you're just window shopping to see what our leveling setup would look like if you choose to play it, this is today going to be just based quite heavily around the strongest Druid build from last season, because while we got a ton of buffs as a class, there were also many changes to the way that normal things worked, and while the way that our core skill-based builds work has shifted pretty significantly, they actually didn't touch Windshear's interesting interaction with the Calm Breeze aspect to stack incredibly high amounts of poison damage and turn single-target fights into, well, a breeze. A calm one, even. Of course, that said, while this skill can hit multiple targets, it has a particularly low sort of radius on the hit. You'll want another skill for your damage output to larger groups of enemies as a result, and for general AoE clearing. For that we have a fun addition, Lightning Storm. This was buffed in a number of ways in the patch, but the most impactful of these was that it now scales channeling speed with your attack speed bonuses as a character. So bonus attack speed means more lightning, which means more procs and more damage, and not to mention that we were told ahead of time what to expect for the legendary aspects in the season journey this time around, not the specific aspects themselves, but what we were told is for Druid we would be getting Cataclysm and Companion aspects, which honestly doesn't really help us that much, but this will still be stronger than a build built specifically for those, unless you happen to get an extremely early unique that happens to boost them, which is of course always a possibility to be aware of. That said, this should be strong enough to carry you into World Tier 4 super quickly, if not even beyond that. And so let's talk about the skill tree and where to put your points, your spirit boons and where to set them. Then we'll talk about the legendaries that you want to specifically go out and look for and complete dungeons for as early as you can, and then we'll just talk about weapon tempering early on and how to play the build. I should also mention just for clarity that all the footage you're seeing here in the background is on the live Season 4 servers, so it isn't at all perfect representation of what this will look like in Season 5. Cataclysm is very different this season, as is Lightning Storm, honestly. This is just a general look at the flow and abilities that are used and how they feel together to begin with. Starting off then with your basic skill, we of course want Wind Shear if that wasn't clear from the opening, and because the main damage of Wind Shear will come from Calm Breeze, bonus ranks of the skill don't actually increase the damage at all, which makes it very economic as far as the skill point spend to damage ratio. We also grab Enhanced Wind Shear here for the vulnerable application chance. Then we unlock our core skill nodes, and then we'll be taking Lightning Storm as well as Enhanced Lightning Storm, which gives you a 6-second window after using Lightning Storm where you will not have the size of your storm decrease, which allows us 6 seconds of using Wind Shear on repeat or movement in between casts while still keeping the size of Lightning Storm up, which is really quite solid to do. Then we round back and grab Fierce Wind Shear for the movement speed bonus as travel time from enemy to enemy as one of the main time sinks of leveling, honestly, and then we go over and take Raging Lightning Storm for an additional lightning strike at the end of Lightning Storm from the full duration. After that you'll want to pick up Blood Howl in your defensive node tree for a low cooldown heal on demand. Its enhancement as well makes it so that when you kill enemies it will reduce its own cooldown, and then Innate Blood Howl will leveling for resource gain on cast, as we can otherwise have resource issues a little bit when using a lot of core skills. Once you've actually fixed your resource issues with the build, however, you would want to switch this over to Preserving Blood Howl for the bonus attack speed that gives you instead. However, early on, this is the one that you want, and then once you've got that, we take Shred as well as its enhancement, and then also Primal Shred. The main purpose of this is sheerly the movement that Shred offers us, letting us go from enemy to enemy. It also gives us some healing and some bonus attack speed with the skill when we use it from the enhancement too, which is nice to have, but the main use of taking Primal Shred especially is so that every one of the combo hits does actually dash you to an enemy, so you can use this for movement speed in things like dungeon clearing or helltide where you actually have a string of enemies that you can leap between. Then past that we grab one single point into wolves, just the basic wolves, we don't even take any enhancements, and this is quite simply for the concept that if an enemy is hitting your wolf, it's not hitting you, so this makes you take less damage very simply. We will be getting rid of this though later on when we pick up our proper 6th skill, on which note we will be grabbing Cyclone Armor as well as its enhancement, and then also Berserking Cyclone Armor. This gives us a bunch of non-elemental damage reduction, as well as just general damage reduction for 2 seconds, triggering once every 10 seconds, which is a pretty nice thing to have. Then we grab 3 ranks of the Nature's Reach passive here for bonus damage to distant enemies, as well as a bonus effect to this if they happen to be immobilized, stunned, slowed, or knocked back, and we apply slow and immobilize very frequently, so this is actually quite effective for this build setup, especially as both of our main damage sources are long range. For now though, we then take 2 ranks of Ancestral Fortitude over here for bonus elemental resistances, as well as 3 ranks of Vigilance, which it unlocks for a bunch of bonus general damage reduction for 6 seconds after casting a defensive skill. And this is notably stronger of a passive than it was before this patch too. It's actually much better than it will be in this tooltip. It's now 21% for all 3 ranks, which is pretty good. With those points then, we have unlocked the ultimate node cluster right here, especially if we take that 1 point out of Wolves to give us 1 skill slot left on our bar, and instead we'll be putting that now into Cataclysm for our ultimate skill. This is just so much better after the patch. They freshly buffed this to not only do twice as many lightning strikes as it has done in Season 4 to begin with, but also to have much better target tracking with the lightning strikes, as this was a feature of the new Druid unique on the PTR that they quite rightly realized should probably just be a base functionality of the skill itself, especially for an ultimate skill. So now it is, and it's way better than it used to be. Not to mention, if you get lucky and find the new Cataclysm unique ring, it boosts it and turns this into a global damage buff while it's active too, which is really strong, especially as we can reduce its cooldown. We also then take its enhancements, of course, for Prime Cataclysm, which increases the duration of the effect, and Supreme Cataclysm, which makes all of the hits make enemies vulnerable for 6 seconds, and that's just nice to have for multi-target scenarios where we aren't spamming wind shear like we do with bosses, as that's otherwise our main vulnerable application. I should also mention that this is the skill that will just feel the most different to use in Season 5 from how it's looking in my background footage, as it just has changed so significantly and been made way better. Then you want to go back up and grab your 3rd rank of Ancestral Fortitude here for that final bit of resistance bonus. Then we're going to be taking 3 ranks of the Defiance passive here for a good chunk of bonus damage with nature magic to elite enemies. Then we're going to be taking 1 rank of the Elemental Exposure passive, mostly just to let us take 2 ranks of Charged Atmosphere, which fires off a lightning bolt every few seconds at a random enemy nearby. This also unlocks our key passives with that point spent, and so with this we're going to be taking what you might actually expect here, which is Perfect Storm. Given that we have consistent vulnerable application access for chunkier targets, we also consistently slow enemies with our poisons, which we'll be applying through a passive later on, and this key passive has also gotten a pretty significant buff too. Quite literally, it will be 33% stronger than it was before Season 5. It is going to be a 40% increased damage as opposed to the 30% that you see in the Season 4 tooltip right here, so it's genuinely quite good now. Past that, we'll be taking the final rank of Charged Atmosphere here, as well as 3 ranks of Electric Shock for a 24% lucky hit chance to immobilize enemies with lightning damage, instead increasing the damage dealt of the lightning if they aren't already just immobilized before that. This is great for our group clearing, and we also are going to be taking 3 ranks of Bad Omen right here for a 30% lucky hit chance when hitting vulnerable enemies to spawn bonus lightning bolts to hit them. And honestly, this is sort of the main sort of beauty of Lightning Storm, is we aren't really putting extra points into Lightning Storm itself. The way that it scales is with these passives, things like this, and then also with legendary aspects that we'll also be putting on as we go. Then past that, we're going to be putting on 1 rank of Predatory Instinct, mostly just for bonus ranks of the Great Gate. You may notice that I have way too many ranks of this skill. It gives you bonus move speed while in werewolf form and for 3 seconds after leaving it, and the reason I have so many bonus ranks is because this is a premium tempering affix. It just gives you so much extra speed, and that is really useful, especially as we are swapping in and out of werewolf form as we move between Shred and Bloodhowl on our actual bar. Then we're going to be grabbing 3 ranks of Circle of Life over here just for a bit of healing every time that we use Lightning Storm, and you can force this by actually spamming Lightning Storm instead of holding it down, which does make this trigger more frequently, just that little bit extra. Then we take 3 ranks of Quick Shift for scaling increased general damage the more often that you switch your actual form, and our main way of doing this is Shred as well as Bloodhowl, which we sort of alternate to activate this a significant amount while clearing through regular content. And again, Shred is for movement above all else, but we do use it quite frequently. Then we take 3 ranks of Natural Fortitude here for 6% maximum life gained as Fortify when shapeshifting, and then 3 ranks of Defensive Posture over here to increase Fortify gained from all sources as well as damage reduction while fortified too. With that, you will have 1 point left, and the most effective way to spend that is just 1 rank of Neurotoxin, which makes your poisons also slow enemies, activating a few of our other effects, making this honestly really good. You could even move this earlier if you want to. It does increase your damage, but we get a lot of utility before we jump on this, so it depends on what you actually want to prioritize for your leveling journey. As well, you would move the 3 defensive posture points out of here and instead stick them into Envenom for a notable damage increase once you get to a certain point of crit chance. If you're above about 25%, then this becomes extremely worth having. If you're not, then it doesn't really, and it's not overly worth hunting crit chance while leveling, honestly, but if you hit this, it's important to be aware of. And with that, your skill points are fully covered, so let's talk about your spirit boons while leveling this setup. Once you have everything, what you would want are the wariness boon in the stag path for 15% damage reduction from elites. Then you would want swooping attacks for 15% bonus attack speed, especially for our current setup. This is just worth more than having crit chance or crit damage. Then you want bolster in the wolf path for a ton of fortify gain every time that we use a defensive skill. Then lastly, you want to bond with the snake path and take both overload for the lucky hit bonus lightning damage that it gives us, and especially calm before the storm for the cooldown reduction on cataclysm with nature magic skill lucky hit chance. As far as the order of these, you want to build up the eagle path first for the attack speed, then the snake path where you would start with calm before the storm, then you want to take the wolf path and then take the stag path, finishing up by just getting your second bond on the actual snake path and taking overload. With that covered, then let's talk about our legendaries for this build. And for a leveling build, for the most part, you want to focus on a couple of specific things, being only filling up your jewelry slots. It is really just bad use of resources to be applying legendary aspects to slots that you are switching out constantly while leveling, and jewelry is the least detrimental to leave at lower item power for longest periods of time while doing so. So we have these 3 slots to work with mainly. The other main focus is that we are choosing legendaries that we can guaranteed get, the ones that are added to the codex on dungeon completion, which is very doable and purposeful, not the ones that require complete RNG to actually acquire, which would really slow down your leveling if we needed them. That said, on your amulet is going to be our most important one, the aspect of the Calm Breeze, which is unlocked by completing the Grinning Labyrinth dungeon in the Dry Steppes. This is what turns our wind shear into a poison damage machine, while also giving you a chance on hit to just restore our full spirit bar too. We also then want the Overcharged aspect, which is unlocked by completing the Mariner's Refuge dungeon in Skosglen. This gives us lucky hit chance on lightning damage applied to cause a target to pulse damage around them, really helping activate our AoE potential with Lightning Storm and all of our procs. And then in your third slot for the early section, you will actually be just wanting to take Edge Masters quite simply for the bonus damage that this gives you, scaling with the higher resource amounts that you have. The main thing that we need bonus damage for from this is boss fights, where we focus on our basic skill usage anyways, which of course does not use resource. That said, this one does get replaced eventually if you get better RNG legendaries, the ones that you can't force to drop, and the ones that you would really want to aim for this are Moonrise for a ton of bonus attack speed and bonus basic skill damage, Adaptability, which is also basically just based around basic skills giving you bonus spirit generation when below 50% resource, and bonus basic skill damage when above 50% resource. Outside of that, another one that you would want to use if you find it is the Runeworker's Conduit aspect, which has actually been changed this season in Season 5 to actually increase the damage of all lightning bolts that hit enemies by a multiplicative bonus if you just have this applied. Even though we won't have high crit chance while leveling, so we don't get the first effect, boosting the damage of all the lightning bolts from everything else that we do is actually quite effective, as we do have a bunch of those passives for a reason. Outside of that then, be on the lookout for both of the new Cataclysm Ring unique and the Ascetics Unsung Wraps Gloves unique, the Lightning Storm unique, and if either of these happen to drop for you while you're leveling, they just boost us a fairly large amount to just plug in and play, and they're very strong, and can even be used together, synergistically. Finally then, let's talk about your actual tempering for this, and while you don't want to be tempering everything obviously as you level, offensive and weapon tempers tend to be important, and in this build, the ones that you want to focus on for that are especially Wind Shear bonus projectile chance to really boost our single target damage a fair amount. Then past that, you would go for damage to distant enemies secondarily, as that is one of our other main goals. Finally then, let's just talk about how to actually play this just for full clarity's sake. Shred is mostly a movement tool in this build. The active skill for Cyclone Armor you just want to use if you get swarmed by too many little guys to shove them away and put them back in distant range. Blood Howl you basically just want to use on cooldown for the heal and the spirit gain, and then for the most part Wind Shear for larger enemies or for bosses. Lightning Storm to clear out groups, and if you use Lightning Storm at least once every 6 seconds, it won't diminish in size, which is important to keep an eye on to actually maximize the use of this. Cataclysm then you want to keep on cooldown about as much as possible because it's really strong and we have cooldown reduction chances with it, but mostly focus on using it for packs of elites or bosses ideally, especially with the enhanced target tracking that it has in Season 5, making it much better for solo targets. That just about does it for today then everyone, your Wind Shear Lightning Storm Druid leveling build for Season 5. And honestly, I think this one is a pretty fun way to shake up the leveling flow that the class has had for ages, while also looking to be extremely promising on the power side of things too. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and hopefully you enjoy using it for yourself as well in game if you choose to do so. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.